It's time to change the conversation about mental health.
When you know something is wrong.
When you feel alone.
When you can't explain what hurts.
When every day is a struggle.
When you can't ask for help.
When your friend or family member seems fine on the outside,
but hurts on the inside. Sometimes I feel as though I'm the only one that feels. But I know that's not true.
We can change.
We can change.
We can change.
We can make a difference.
There's power in our difference.
We can support each other.
We can fight stigma.
We say it's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay to have a mental health condition.
We all want to feel heard.
To find hope.
And to live in a world without stigma.
Without discrimination.
And we are a force to be reckoned with.
I am not what happened to me.
I am how I overcame it.
Stand with us.
And discrimination in mental health.
You can see the person, not the condition.
You can build understanding.
You can play your part.
The conversation changes with me.
With me.
With me.
We are well-beings.
We are all well-beings.
Day is long and the night is yours alone. When you're sure you've had enough of this life, hang on. Don't let yourself go. 'Cause everybody cries and everybody hurts sometimes. Sometimes everything is wrong. It's time to sing along. When your day is night, hold on, hold on. If you feel like letting go, hold on. If you feel like letting go, hold on. If you feel like letting go. 'Cause everybody hurts. Don't throw your hand. Don't throw your hand. WETA, with a coalition of partners, welcomes you to the Well-Being's Youth Mental Health Project. Hi, I'm Bill Pullman, and I'm honored to be with you as we launch this national campaign from public media. Well-Beings is a groundbreaking project at a very important point in time. Mental illness disproportionately affects our young people and the most disadvantaged populations among us. The growing mental health movement has set the stage for dramatic change, to raise awareness, to reduce stigma, to focus on prevention and early intervention, and the promise of more research for new treatments. Together, we can bring mental illness and discrimination out of the shadows, and it's not a day too soon. So thank you for being here today.
The signature documentary series in the Well-Beings campaign is Ken Burns Presents Hiding in Plain Sight, Our Mental Health Crisis. Produced and directed by Ewers Brothers Productions and written by David Blistine, the film will explore, through lived experiences, the youth mental health crisis in our country. Currently in production, this 4-hour documentary film is slated to air on PBS stations in spring 2022.
Wellbeings.org and hashtag Wellbeings will be adding content every week over the 2 years, including Brave Teens, where teen storytellers go on the record about their mental health journeys.
And Brave High, a digital feature-length documentary where students in high school productions share their mental health stories through spoken word, music, and dance without fear, shame, or stigma.
Out of the Dark, a short-form digital series that will profile lives transformed by mental health challenges, highlighting the power of difference.
PBS NewsHour's student reporting labs engage high school journalism students as correspondents that report on youth mental health from more than 150 high schools across 46 states.
Good evening, I'm Steve Maud, producer and host of WUCF's Newsnight program. Thank you for joining me for WUCF's virtual live stream event as part of the PBS Well-Beings Tour on youth mental health. It was created by the public media station WETA in Washington in partnership with member stations like WUCF. Our thanks to the many national and local partners across Central Florida and throughout the country. I'm looking forward to a thoughtful discussion on the impact of inequity and COVID-19 on the mental health of Black youth with our expert panel of mental health professionals here in Central Florida. You can post your comments and questions in the comments section of the WUCF TV or Wellbeings Facebook and YouTube pages. In Central Florida, we felt it was important to talk about Black youth in particular. The Congressional Black Caucus issued a report this past December calling attention to the mental health crisis currently faced by Black youth. Their task force found that the suicide death rate of Black youth is increasing faster than it is for any other racial or ethnic group. Over the past decade, the number of suicide deaths among Black youth has almost doubled, and suicide attempts increased by more than 70% between 1991 and 2017 for Black adolescents. Well, let me introduce you to tonight's panel for this discussion. I'm joined by Dr. Candace Jones of Edgewater Pediatrics, Davia Knight, outpatient telehealth clinician at Empower, Jeffrey McCary, Director of Operations and Research for the Outlook Mental Health Clinic and Mental Health Association of Central Florida, and Tamia McEwen, a peer professional and wellness advocate for Peer Support Space. Thank you so much, all of you, for coming on. I really appreciate you coming to talk about this really important subject. Well, I want to start off by talking about, where we were before 2020. We'll move on to 2020 in a moment because it's quite a year, but let's talk about where we were before. What trends have we been seeing, with youth mental health in general? And Candace, I'll send that one to you first.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me this evening. This is a very important conversation. As a pediatrician, I'm seeing similar trends in my practice as to what is happening nationally. So prior to 2020, and some of these stats have already been mentioned, 1 in 6, or about 17% US youth age 6 to 17 experience a mental health disorder each year. In the educational setting, high school students with significant symptoms of depression are more than twice as likely to drop out compared to their peers. In the criminal justice setting, about 70% of youth in the juvenile justice system have a diagnosed mental illness. And finally, suicide is the second leading cause of death among young people aged 10 to 34, and the overall suicide rate in the US has increased by 31% since 2001. These are all alarming statistics prior to COVID, but they are increasing due to the added stress and trauma of COVID-19, this pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, those are some really alarming numbers. And Jeffrey, let me ask you, you know, from your experience, does that kind of jive with what you're seeing and experiencing?
Oh yes, of course. Candace hit it on the head when she discussed how the numbers are just rising tremendously. Ever since it's been researched since 1991, the numbers for Black youth committing suicide has risen over 70%. And it's sad that a lot of people believe that this isn't a real issue, especially in the Black community. So I think it's very important for us to look into this as a public health issue, not just a issue with race. This is a tremendous problem that's going to propose a problem in the future. Before 2020, we had issues with mental health, and that's come to the forefront before. Things such as multiple school shootings. We endured a Great Recession, gang violence, teen pregnancies, cyberbullying, and substance abuse, along with trying to obtain academic excellence and going through the pressures of that. So when you start noticing the correlations of this, the rapid increase of mental health crises just makes sense.
Well, what Jeffrey said there, particularly about some of the traumatic events that happened before 2020, including school shootings, which is an issue that we're intimately familiar with here in Florida, of course. You know, Davia, those kinds of events, you know, 2020 is traumatic, but just staying before 2020 for a moment, I mean, those kinds of events are traumatic. Are they, you know, what have you been seeing in terms of how they impact Black youth? You know, we're a very diverse state here in Florida.
I've definitely been seeing an increase. Black youth, they have their struggles in school, and I can also see that it becomes a stressor for parents as well. It's been a stressor for the entire family to maintain themselves as a unit. Thankfully, we have pediatricians pediatricians and other mental health professionals who are screening young people, because without the screening, they can't get the help they need. So we would need the community to help them to be connected.
Yeah, let me turn to you, Tamia. I mean, does what you're hearing here ring true in terms of the trends that we've been seeing over the last few years? Is this a long-running trend? Before we talk about this year, is this sort of something that you're seeing as well?
Yes, thank you. Most definitely. We have to remember that we are human beings, and our youth, our Black youth, are human beings. So anything that's happening in the nation, it's coming down in epic proportions, and that pressure is coming to our youth, who may not have the ability to deconstruct, who may not have the ability to really be able to sit with the difficult emotions that they're dealing with, or be able to even articulate it. So when we're looking at how we can better serve our youth, it's really being able to take better care of our youth as human beings as a whole. mind, body, soul, emotion, and spirit. Being able to create those communities within the home and being able to give those tools to them individually to be able to take better care of themselves and create those communities where we're taking better care.
Yeah, and that holistic approach, I think, is probably something we'll talk a little bit more about a little later on in the program. Well, let's look at the year we're in now, 2020. How could we forget? A very stressful year on many of us. And I'm wondering how the coronavirus and issues around that have particularly exacerbated the issue as it is for vis-a-vis Black youth. You know, we've seen across the nation disparities in how the African American population has been impacted by this pandemic. Let me turn to you first on this, Candace. How has the coronavirus and COVID-19 been, you know, for Black youth and in terms of stress and mental health?
Sure. Thanks for that question. You know, a Pew Research study back in February of 2019 showed the top concerns of teens ages 13 to 17 were anxiety and depression and bullying and things like drug and alcohol use and abuse. And now we add on, as you said, the pandemic, which is causing strain on families, social isolation, school disruption, worry, loss, and fear of COVID-19, and with no end in sight, all this uncertainty. Our teens are dealing with a lot of stress. And Black youth seem to have it worse. Black youth age 18 to 29 are reported to be experiencing some of the highest rates of anxiety and depression during the pandemic due to the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on the Black community that we are seeing, and the concurrent trauma of the murder of George Floyd and others, and ongoing civil unrest. So it's just, I'm not surprised, because when you see communities that are marginalized, the Black, Indigenous, people of color, our youth are within that community, and we are already pushed to the side. Our humanity is not valued like others. And so when we add on layer upon layer upon layer of adversity, we're going to have some mental distress because of that. And that's what our youth are experiencing, our Black youth.
Well, talking of what Black youth are experiencing, I want to hear from Deja Williams. She's a 16-year-old living here in Orlando, and she was brave enough to share her writing with us. Ella Shockley from PBS NewsHour's Student Reporting Labs and a student at Howard W. Blake High School in Tampa spoke with Deja about the challenges that she's faced.
I feel like I'm trapped within my own mind. No one can hear me. No one knows what I'm saying. I feel like no one knows who I am. I don't like this feeling. I like the feeling of belonging. I like the feeling of love. I like the feeling of comfort. I like the feeling of safety. I like the feeling of peace. I like the feeling of freedom. Yet, freedom is something that I cannot seem to grasp within my own fingers. I feel like each time I get a glimpse of it, it rushes off in the view before my eyes, mocking my misery. I feel like each time I go somewhere, it purposely dangles itself in front of my eyes, yet so far from me to just only be able to view it. I feel like freedom has its way of laughing at me, like a loose gingerbread man on a run. I'm sitting in a classroom with two of the sophomores and a teacher, and neither has flickered their eyes over to my tear-stained face. I have tears running down my cheeks endlessly, and I'm aware of my makeup brushing off. My mascara is something that doesn't put up the battle to remain on my lashes. My long lashes, as my mother would say. Who am I to sit ladylike in such a situation where I was just accused and hurt by someone that has higher power than me in the land that I stand on? Who are we to use our positions for our own advantage, to put ourselves on a higher stool, looking down upon the people who are trapped within our minds? If they were to even come out, the venom would be jabbed through them easily, making them wish they never appeared outside their own mind. We are safe within our minds. the walls of our heads protecting us from the cruel view we stand before. Our surroundings overwhelm our senses, allowing us to curl up within our minds, feeling the only protection provided. Yet, not even our minds can protect us from everything. What will protect us from getting sick? What will protect us from losing our hold on our family? What will protect us from fear? What will protect us from a deadly disease? Has anyone watched the news? Read the articles? Check the statistics? Something is happening and fear is slow in taking over. It's traveling across the globe, person by person. I suppose I'm the only one who looks at international news. No one else seems bothered by it. It's taken over in Asia. It's spread to Europe. I can only assume they were next. Yet how is no one afraid? Or am I just that fearful of everything that I get too worked up? Another thing that basically controls me and tugs me away from freedom. Fear. Just how is it so strong and what's its secret? What is freedom? To be free from all the worries that have ever forced their way into your mind. What is freedom? The feeling of never crying again because all it ever does is tear you apart. What is freedom? How would I know when I've never had it once in my life before? What is freedom? Freedom is everything. Freedom is nothing. Freedom is not worrying about going home to a family that isn't living together. Freedom is not going to school worried that the students would pick at you, yet have much higher power than you when you defend yourself. Freedom is not having the tears to run down your cheeks when you've tried longer for an hour to clear them away, going to 3 different bathrooms in 3 different buildings. Freedom is being able to go home and rest when there's no work to be done. Freedom is not having the feeling of being caged in 4 walls that aren't the security of your home, but rather a building owned by the whites. Freedom is not feeling intimidated by the least of your very own character who's trying to calm themselves down, struggling to stay within peace. Freedom is having all your faith in the Lord, the feeling of His presence when you need Him the most. Freedom is the feeling of not feeling alone, walking through a large, empty gym of a private school when searching for someone to comfort you. Freedom is not having to push away nor ignore the people who question your downfall of a mood when it's written clearly on your face that you're not alright. Freedom is not having the feeling of humiliation rush over your entire form, the shame filling you up because of the endless tears. This isn't freedom, and I know it isn't. What is freedom? Freedom is everything. Freedom is nothing. I have not even decided to leave at this moment. Freedom mocks me. Freedom laughs at me. Freedom is right in front of me, yet I cannot seem to grasp it within my own fingers. Why can I not have freedom? Why does freedom choose to tease itself in front of my hazel eyes, the ones that the Lord has blessed me with? My Lord, why have I been picked out to be picked on? My God, why have you allowed this to carry on for so long? My Father, why have I not been able to feel your presence? My Savior, why has the chosen been chosen to live this way? What is freedom? Freedom is everything. Freedom is nothing. This isn't freedom. I just want freedom. Freedom from them.
That's a very powerful essay, Deja. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
Could you give us some context and what was going on during the time that you wrote this essay?
When I wrote this essay, it was back in February when I was attending a private school. The day I wrote that, I was so overwhelmed with so many emotions. I didn't know how to stop crying. I felt like I was alone. I felt picked on because I was being picked at by all the students and even teachers at the school. And I just felt like everything around me was collapsing, and I had an anxiety attack, and I was just overwhelmed. So I guess I had to let out my emotions somehow, and the only way to do that was through writing.
With the experiences of bullying at previous schools, would you be willing to share those experiences and extend on the feelings that you had during that time?
I was bullied ever since I was in pre-K. Every grade level, it seemed like there was more and more people that bullied me, so my self-esteem was never high. I was picked at for learning Mandarin. People called me an Asian wannabe. They thought I was throwing away my own race and nationality. They made fun of me. They physically abused me. They verbally abused me. The boys at my private school, they would push me down the stairs, or when I was trying to take a test, there's like an audio. Since I took language courses, they would just yell and scream in my ear so I couldn't be able to hear. The entire school years, like, I felt like I was being discriminated against. I was the only African American student in the actual school, and I was angry, I was sad, I was so frustrated and stressed. I remember throwing my backpack and screaming. I remember throwing my house keys, screaming. I remember going up to my room and just throwing things, and I was just screaming. I was crying and I was frustrated. My mom called me in her room. She said, "What's wrong?" And I couldn't even explain to her. I said, "I'm tired of talking. I'm tired of explaining." And I was just tired. I can't even put into words how much pain it's been. So I'm really glad that I'm a homeschool student, because it's like, no matter how many times I changed schools or went to a public school or private school, I've had pretty much a rough time just going to an actual school.
Incredibly powerful stuff there. Deja Williams sharing her experience of bullying and discrimination. Just a really powerful story, something to behold. And it's worth noting that she is 16 years old. Themes that I kept hearing there were, a sense of isolation and helplessness that she was feeling, which leads me to ask you, Davia, first. How has the pandemic and social isolation added further to the stress of our youth? And is there a difference when it comes to Black youth in particular from what you can see, Davia?
It can definitely add to the stress of Black youth because they are reported to have a history of trauma and adversity. And if it continues to occur, they are 5 times more likely to die by suicide than those individuals without a history. We refer to it in the counseling field as ACEs, which are adverse childhood experiences. It can be emotional, physical, or sexual abuse, emotional neglect or physical neglect. You can have a parent in the household that is being treated violently, household member having a mental illness, or someone in the family that is incarcerated. And you're asking if it's different as it compares to Black youth. I would say yes, because I definitely connected with Deja's story and with the themes of hopelessness and isolation and being bullied, and to hear that no one saw her tears definitely it just makes me feel like I wanted to reach out to her myself as a therapist, because how could you not see? There are warning signs, and I think some people may not believe because there's a stigma also attached to Black women as a whole to, take care of everything and be strong. But even while being strong, there's still hurt, and it needs to be addressed. Uh, it would be encouraged to have a mental health professional in schools, but there also is a lack of that as well.
Yeah, Candace, what do you think?
The pandemic, racism, all the things that Deja talked about. And by the way, she's my patient. I love it, love it, love it. I had her permission to share that. I love her, wonderful family, wonderfully bright, smart girl, and I knew she would be great for this this activity. But the pandemic, racism, and poverty are all forms of adversity that disproportionately affect our Black youth. For youth who have a safe, stable, and nurturing environment, supportive family, friends, or a caring adult, they will have the ability to overcome all of this. However, young people who lack those protective factors, or what we call buffering, will experience toxic stress. And this leads to a prolonged activation of stress responses, which damages the developing brain and body, leading to mental, physical, behavioral, and even learning problems, and even early death. That ACEs that Davia talked about is what I'm speaking of. ACEs, unbuffered, leads to toxic stress and leads to all these poor outcomes. Helping Black youth cope with stress, build resilience, and heal from these traumas, whether it's historical through racism, the pandemic, poverty, other social determinants of health, are all critical for them to reach their full potential in life. And we have to recognize that we have to tackle these things for them.
Jeffrey, let me come to you. I mean, the same question to you, really. And, you know, certainly on the Newsnight program on WUCF, we've talked a lot about how this affects youth when it comes to sort of school closures and things like that, and whether classrooms should be open, because that is such an important part of the mental health of youth. And this just really funnels in to this whole issue that we're seeing in 2020, right?
Oh yes, of course. It's just really sad to have already disparities here, and then it's just exacerbated more and more due to this pandemic. And it was just, no one expected it to happen in such a mass form. So for families who don't have the tools to equip and handle situations like this, they're the ones really struggling. A lot of times, Black people do not believe that seeking mental health care is necessary and need. So a lot of times they may not see the signs of it. So when you have a child who is in the home predominantly and not going to school, they're not really getting those educators or anyone else who understands what signs and symptoms to look for when it comes to referring somebody to get mental health treatment. And another thing I wanted to state, there has been a lot of reports about underreporting in domestic violence and child abuse because of the pandemic. That goes along with everything else I was saying. We don't get to have the opportunity to have these professionals look over the children in the way that it was once before. So there's definitely a need for children to be out and be around positive adults, positive people, but it's really posed a problem for us Black youth, unfortunately.
Yeah, no doubt that domestic violence issue has really come to the fore during this pandemic. Tamia, let me turn to you. Deja also mentions there racial discrimination. 2020 has really brought issues of inequity to the forefront, with the increasing spotlight on police violence, for example, and racism, and the Black Lives Matter protests, of course, as well. Those are also things that have to be playing on the minds of Black youth this year.
Yes, definitely. One thing that really sticks out to me about Davia's story, is the fact that she wanted an outlet. She needed an outlet, and it speaks to really the need for our youth and our communities to be able to have a healthy, safe outlet to be able to discuss. That's what peer spaces provide, an opportunity to be able to come together with positive intention and be surrounded with individuals who are loving and caring, so that you will be able to release in a healthy way. Because regardless of what's going on, our minds, our bodies absorb what's happening, whether we're seeing things playing out on the television, whether we're looking at it on social media, we're absorbing that. We're absorbing those things that are happening. So we need to have outlets. We need to have an opportunity to be able to express ourselves, to be able to release, so that our minds and our bodies can heal and we can move on. So most definitely extremely impactful to create those safe spaces to be able to release.
Yeah, just having that outlet is something that I'm hearing from all of you as a sort of a common theme. You know, one thing that really struck me is just how young the children are when they start to be impacted by these issues. You know, our case study there being 16 years old, but you know, Black males 5 to 11 years are more likely to die by suicide compared to their white peers. You know, does that sit? I'll turn to you, Candace, in the pediatrics field. Does that sit with your experience?
Absolutely. That is a fairly newer trend that we've been seeing occurring with youth, especially Black youth, that younger and younger children are experiencing depression and anxiety and that increase in suicide rate among African American children from 5 to 11 years of age. And that has been an increasingly persistent problem since 1993. And this is nearly twice that of white counterparts. And we ask why is this happening? And, you know, is it poverty? Is it racism? Is it bullying? Is it the influence of social media platforms? Are there underlying mental illness like depression that's going unrecognized or untreated? It's multifactorial. And there is extensive research that's going on to try to tease this out so that we can know how to intervene, screen, pick up on it, address it early, and try to reverse this trend. But I am seeing that in my young patients.
Yeah, I do want to talk about that issue of social media in a little bit, because that is a really important issue in this day and age. You know, as the report from the Congressional Black Caucus stated, suicide attempts and deaths are increasing dramatically. You know, what is preventing, and we talked about this a little earlier on, a number of you alluded to this, you know, what's preventing Black youth from getting that help? You know, what are some of the barriers that we see in place? And I'll send that one to you, Davia, first.
One that I can speak to from a personal perspective is culturally. I am Jamaican by birth, and coming to America was a plight for my family. Now, as it pertains to Black youth, when I first went to counseling, it was more of, you know, my mom never said what happens in this house stays in this house, but we were kind of reluctant to share because I was afraid that my therapist wouldn't connect with me. But we connected through my faith in Christ, and I just really understood from a level of knowing that I had a safe space to go to, knowing that I could tell her things that was happening to me or things that, you know, that was occurring within my life. And while being Black, and she was white, not to mention that it pertains negatively, because you don't have to be the same race to treat a Black child. Competency is there. I would present to the nation to ask questions like I do in my session. If I don't seem to see that I'm connecting or that I'm not hearing something correctly, I never assume. I always ask, and it makes the process a lot easier when it comes to Black youth. They really want to feel heard and feel validated. That's definitely important.
And you also raise another very important issue there, the sort of cultural issue, and also sort of partly the immigrant experience as well of some people. And of course, you know, we have a large percentage of our population in Florida that are foreign born, and it might experience the issues that we're seeing in 2020 in different ways. Let me turn to you, Jeffrey, a moment. We've reported on WUCF Newsnight about inequities in healthcare outcomes in general for African Americans in Florida. You know, for example, infant mortality, that kind of thing. And I'm wondering whether those structural inequities in healthcare are at play here when it comes to mental health as well. Does this sort of transcend different areas of medicine?
Oh yes, of course. I want to definitely mention the disparities that come into play when it comes to Black people seeking mental health, especially the youth. A lot of times we have a sense of mistrust when it comes to seeking a provider, because there's a long history of unethical medical practices that have been performed on us in the past that have been well documented. And other things like over-labeling of conduct disorder and disruptive behavior on Black youth, as opposed to a mood disorder or PTSD, just causes a lot of anxiety and stigma to be labeled with a disorder like that. And that also kind of really pushes a lot of our Black youth into the school to prison pipelines. So I think it really takes somebody who's culturally competent that needs to really be pushed through initiatives through our healthcare system to have culturally competent providers. It's really important to bring awareness to the need of Black mental health providers and Black providers in general. Really, that will really be key to reducing stigma and reducing some of the mistrust that come to play when it comes to healthcare.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And Tamia, do you agree there? Is there an issue of mistrust in addition to sort of the systemic failures in the healthcare industry and medicine in general? Is there a general mistrust in the African American community from your experience with these kinds of things?
Oh yes, most definitely. There's a general general mistrust. Period, when you see that you have not been treated well, when you see there's a dissonance, there's a cognitive dissonance between what's promised and what's actually happening. In the case of the story that we looked at, is the responsibility of the adults to create an affirming and a safe environment for our youth. So that's not a pressure that should be placed upon the shoulders of our youth to be able to, liberate themselves. And when we're listening and when we're looking at what's going on, that means that we also need to listen. We need to listen and really be tuned in to what's happening. When we're asking the question, why aren't they asking for help, or why aren't they seeking help? So I would have to pose the counter question and say, well, are we listening? Are we really listening and observing what's going on with our youth? And are we really creating those well environments for them to be able to flourish? That's a question that they should not have to ask.
Yeah, and that's a question. I mean, Candace, what do you think? I mean, are we listening? And what are some of the issues that Black youth have when it comes to seeking counseling and seeking help with mental health issues?
I totally agree with all of the panelists, all of their points. And I would just sum it up to say, we know that about 50% of youth don't receive, only about 50% receive mental health treatment. And our Black youth, those numbers are even lower. Black youth are following the lead or under the guidance of their community and churches and parents and caregivers. And that is a resistance, as someone stated, to receiving professional help for mental illness. I see this in my practice. It's like pulling teeth and trying to get parents and the young people. And some of this, especially with adolescents by nature and just their developmental phase, don't want to talk to anybody. And so I have to pull teeth and convince and really work on them to get therapy or counseling. Sometimes we have to defeat this mentality and erase the stigma around mental health, and getting therapy or taking medication even if needed. Other concerns I encounter in practice is the lack of quality counselors and therapists of color. I would like to think that any therapist could help my Black patient with their mental health concerns, but my patients ask for someone who looks like them. If it's a Black young lady, she wants a Black lady. If it's a Black young man, he wants a Black man. And we have a very hard time finding quality counselors and therapists. That's why when I saw Davia, I said, where are you? Automatically, I'm trying to put her on our list of resources. Then there are other barriers such as lack of access and difficulties with insurance coverage. We know that the Black community is underrepresented in all of those barriers of access, insurance, being able to pay, being able to get there. This is all frustrating to them, and it leads sometimes to my families just giving up.
You know, Candace, you raised so many salient points there, and ones that we are constantly talking about here in Florida with regards to coverage and access to care. You know, Davia, what do you think about Candace's point about there being really a dearth of African Americans in that field? And do you find, I mean, is it true that people want help from people that look like them? Is there sort of a shared experience that people maybe would feel comfortable with? What do you think?
I think that is true, because when I'm in session with my clients and they discover through the telehealth experience that I'm Black, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that you're Black. And they can be themselves due to being able to code switch or using terminology that, you know, in Black culture that is used. I can totally understand where they're coming from. They're also free of judgment. They share more. They feel more comfortable. They're more inclined with, you know, letting you into their home to see like what's going on and finding ways that you can help them. So definitely, they are excited about that. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, you know, Jeffrey, Candace raised the issue of access and insurance, for example. And, you know, I feel like we're talking about access to healthcare a lot, particularly when it comes to minority groups here in Florida. And I wonder whether access is an issue not only to people of color in that field, but generally the ability to get mental health counseling, to get treatment. There seems to be in our state a problem of access, doesn't there?
Oh, yes, it definitely is a problem of access. It's unfortunate to see a lot of people who have jobs, full-time jobs, still do not have insurance, are underinsured, and still cannot get the necessary quality access to mental health care and healthcare, period. It's unfortunate that in Florida, we are ranked so low compared to all states with funding for healthcare and especially mental health care. It just really just goes into our detriment of people having better lives and just living more fulfilled lives. And that's why the disparities just really just are exacerbated when it comes to the issues of the pandemic. And now more and more people are losing their jobs and more people are losing their insurance coverages. The problem is going to for sure get worse within the coming years.
And Jeffrey, the Mental Health Association has support resources to guide people, right?
Yes, thankfully for organizations like the Mental Health Association, we do the best we can with the resources we have, with the resources that are in Central Florida area to provide necessary resources for those who don't know where to go. You know, a lot of times individuals or family or caregivers really just want to see themselves or someone else that they love get the help they need. But a lot of times, because it's not really marketed, advertised, or however you want to put it, on where to go to get this type of healthcare, Mental Health Association really does help that person navigate through these very hard systems, because if someone gets a block, they probably won't go any further than that.
Yeah. Tamia, I just wanted to ask you before we move on into our next segment, you know, beyond that sort of shared experience and trust issues that we've talked about before, is there a disparity in the care that Black youth get? You know, one of the areas, and I mentioned it earlier, when it comes to maternal health, one of the complaints that I heard from several patients was that when they went in to get treatment or to get care from a doctor, they didn't feel they were taken as seriously, or they didn't feel that as an African American, their pain was taken as seriously. And I wonder, when we look at this from a mental health perspective, does that ring true? Does that seem to be something that also is a factor in the field of mental health, particularly for youth, Tamia?
Oh my goodness, definitely. The first thing that popped into my mind was, Zora Neale Hurston, if you're silent about your pain, then they'll kill you and, say you enjoyed it. And so when we talk about, well, why don't you say anything? Why don't you tell anyone? You hit it right on the head. It's not believed. So, oftentimes when we're looking at Black youth or Black people in general, when you're speaking up about something, some type of discomfort, instead of being met with help or empathy or compassion, especially with our youth, it's met with discipline. And so we have to look at the different ways that our coping mechanisms and our coping skills emerge and they come to the surface. Depression looks differently in individuals. Sometimes depression looks like rage. Sometimes depression looks like withdrawal. Sometimes anxiety comes up in laughter and nervous laughter. And so, as professionals and as individuals within the community in these different professions, we have to be able to listen, and we have to be able to look at the whole individual and understand that well-being is for everyone. Well-being is not for the rich alone. Well-being is not for a particular racial group alone. Well-being is for human beings to be well. It is for us all. And we all, that's our inheritance. Our inheritance is wellness. Our inheritance is being well. And so we have to listen, and we have to make sure that everyone has access to that, regardless of race, ethnicity, or economic status. Everyone deserves to be well.
Yeah, I think, that we probably all function better as a society when all of us are doing well, and we don't have certain segments of society that are doing better than others, which brings me to the next point of how can we all help? What can we all do? Well, Deja's mother opened up about her experience addressing her daughter's anxiety. Take a listen.
Miss Williams, what signs did you notice in Deja that suggested that she was needing more support and needed help with what was going on at school? Miss Williams, what signs did you notice in Deja that suggested that she was needing more support and needed help with what was going on at school?
I think the most important thing here when a child is going through this, because I went through it as a kid, and I felt that if you have your parent, your mom, your dad there, it's so important that they be a part of that, and you pay attention, you ask questions, you notice, you watch things. And I'm very attentive on that level. And if you call the school, they would tell you how many times, Mrs. Williams, I was up there. I was up there. It was times that I never yelled, I never screamed, but I was very direct, very firm, very strong with my voice. And I tell parents, listen, pay close attention to your child, learn your child, study them, watch them, listen for little things. Go to their room after work. Hey, how? And my question every day was to you, what was it?
How was school?
How was school?
How was school?
Did anyone mistreat you? Was anyone rude to you? This is a question I have always asked. Deja is the last child. I have 4 daughters, and I did this with all of the girls. And the main reason why I pulled her away, because she has 3 other sisters, and when it comes down to Deja, there is no understanding. So I knew then it's time to take her away, because her other 3 sisters, they be like, okay, Mom, do you need us to go up to? No, ma'am, I don't need you to go up to the school. I would handle it. So it's so important that the mother, the father, even my husband went up there. it's so important that you have to be involved. You have to let that child feel secure and comfortable. Say, you know what, you guys are against me, but my hero, my mom is right here. My dad is here. That is so important. Be involved.
Yeah, learn your child. That seems like pretty important advice. Deja and her mother, Christy there, I should say. Let me turn to the panel again. And I'm wondering what the warning signs are that parents and caregivers and educators, youth service providers, anyone coming in contact with youth should be looking for. And I'll send that one to Candace first.
In pediatrics, we screen youth from 12 and up during their yearly their checkup for depression. And with the stats we were discussing, we probably should be starting earlier. But all too often, young people screen positive for depression and even suicidal thoughts, and their parents didn't know. I've gotten to the point where I'm not surprised at that anymore because it happens too often. I can't stress enough how important connection and relationship are between parent and child. All adults should be asking youth how they are doing in these troubling times and encourage them to share their feelings and listen and show empathy, all the things that Miss Williams said. She's awesome, she rocks, and guide them through these concerns. Some kids won't talk right away, as I said, so we have to monitor and supervise, like Miss Williams said. So from NAMI.org, National Alliance on Mental Illness, some of those warning signs are extreme sadness or worry, mood changes, extreme highs and lows or irritability, withdrawing or isolating, avoiding their friends, families, or activities they once enjoyed, suicidal thoughts. Yes, you should be asking your children that. It doesn't give them the idea. And lastly, poor school performance. They're just going down circling the drain and going down the drain, it seems like. And those things that should spark you to say something's wrong, ask them, talk to them, but also bring them into their pediatrician to have them screened and go from there.
Yeah, Davia, Dr. Jones there, making the point that, a lot of parents may just miss those signs. For a lot of us, we may think, well, goodness, who knows their children better than the parents, right? But so many parents just don't have the sort of expertise, do they, to kind of notice those, what may to professionals seem like obvious signs.
I think that is true. And I do appreciate Dr. Jones. I'm glad that she's on the panel because it gives me hope that she would be someone who can assess the signs while she's screening Black youth, and they can be placed with someone in the resources. As far as me doing telehealth services at Empower, what I've noticed with being in the schools is that a Black child may get suspended versus having an appointment with a therapist. So it begs the question, are we really listening? Do they feel heard? These signs can lead children to be funneled into the pipeline to prison, but why send them there when we have the skills to provide for them? I want parents to be encouraged to trust their gut. Once you learn your child, if you notice that they're doing something and something seems off, trust it.
Yeah. Jeffrey, let me ask you about this and how it might pertain specifically to Black boys. There's a set of stresses, obviously, for boys versus girls in life in general. And I wonder whether, it's whether boys are better at hiding things from their parents. I know I was certainly quite good at that as a child. And I'm wondering whether African-American youth are the same. I mean, is there an issue there?
Oh, yes, it is. I know personally for me, even going through, my school through psychology and social work, there still was something in me that was like, I do not need to seek any kind of mental health treatment. I'm fine. I'm okay. And it wasn't until I actually did seek out a therapist and went through a lot of the things that I suppressed and packed down and didn't think was an issue, such as my anxiety and some of my seasonal depression. And the feeling I felt was just so wonderful, and it gave me more power. And that's something that really pushes me to tell other people that seeking mental health care, especially young men seeking mental health care, is doesn't show that you're weak or anything like that. Because a lot of times they believe that they're crazy, or that other people are going to see them as not normal or weak, like I said. And it's important for caregivers and educators and parents to embrace and normalize mental health care, and also self-care. There's nothing wrong with making it a daily routine in your lifestyle. Just talking about mental health care. One of the best things you can do as a parent or an educator or an adult mentor is to express vulnerability. A lot of times, kids don't like to be told what they can or cannot do. But if you go out and say something like, because we've all been experiencing this pandemic, so if you go out and just say, "Hey, this stuff is really difficult for me. I'm, stressed. I have a lot of anxiety, and I don't know what's going to happen in the future. How is it feeling for you?" Things like that can foster really good communication and dialogue with that youth and with that team, that can really be cathartic for you both. And to just hit the point of Black youth, Black male youth, uh, we really don't like to talk about our issues. We suppress it, and it also often comes out as anger. And that's a point that I said earlier. The school to prison pipeline is, filled with our young Black men, because of these signs aren't being seen as, a mental health condition. They're being seen as a conduct and disruptive behavior. So we need to have people who are more competent, culturally competent, and can look out for the signs, rather than being very punitive with our men.
What do you think about that, Tammy? I mean, do you agree that some of this, has to come from the parents, from example, right? I mean, parents expressing their own vulnerabilities, making sure that their children know that it's okay, that there shouldn't be a stigma around this.
Yes, definitely. It's extremely important for parents to lead by example, even to the point of really understanding what factors can play into a mental health crisis for our children. Really understanding the role that nutrition plays in overall health and wellness, the role that inflammation plays, in what's going on, inflammation in the body leading to inflammation in the brain, and being able to provide that nourishing, nutritionally nourishing situation through meals for our children, and even access to that. So really expanding our understanding of the factors that play into mental well-being and well-being as a whole, and leading by example. That it's not that we're doing this, I'm eating well because I'm trying to lose weight. No, I'm eating well because it's what really saved my life, my mind, and my body.
I want to actually follow up with Candace on a question that or an issue that Jeffrey touched on there, about the sort of the school to prison pipeline. And it's certainly something on the Newsnight program we've talked a lot about when we're discussing criminal justice. And I wonder, how much a part of that puzzle is to do with mental health. I mean, we talk a lot about policing in America and its contribution to that issue. I wonder whether or not, mental health has some bearing on this, and people's willingness to talk about it, or all the issues that we've been talking about vis-a-vis taking people's mental health seriously. What do you think?
I totally agree with the comments that Jeffrey made, and everyone has echoed that issue. Mental health or mental illness, as everyone has said, shows up differently in youth. And I like to say, I've heard this statement that young people act out what they can't or won't talk out. And so, as it's been said before, adults, authority figures, our police, all need to be trained and competent in recognizing that. And again, that gets back to ACEs. ACEs is not the end of the story. The trauma or the toxic stress and the outcomes of that is not the end of the story. The end of the story comes with recognizing the symptoms of that, which has to do with your mental, the mental outcomes of it, and trying to heal it, right? Healing it. And being able to trauma informed. So having officers, teachers, pediatricians, everyone, every sector in life to be informed about trauma, be informed about adversities in youth, recognize symptoms of that, and act accordingly. Not looking at that youth and saying, "What's wrong with you?" Punish. But what happened to you? You have that empathy of saying, "What happened? Why is this? What can I do? How can I help?" And then get on the healing path. And so I totally agree. Our officers need this training. And that's something we're trying to do here in Central Florida, create a resilient community through trauma-informed care. And I hope we get there. It's being done all across the nation. It's a huge trend. And I encourage everyone to be knowledgeable about ACEs and learn how to look at others through that trauma lens and have the empathy to see others differently and value their humanity. Again, we have to get back to that Black people, people of color, their humanity is not valued versus some others. And we've got to get to that too. That's a heart problem.
Yeah, you raise an important issue, about, what comes next and what support is available. And I think, my producer Shiana is telling me here, that obviously specific guidance is what a lot of people really, really want. And I wonder when, signs have been identified, when a parent sees that there's an issue that they think their child has, what do they do at that point? What are the kind of important services that are available there? What are the kind of first steps that people should take? And I'll send that one to Davia first.
Thank you. I think once parents recognize the signs, they can contact their local mental health facility where they can ask. Let's say it's a Black family, they can always feel free to ask if they have Black therapists on staff. That is something that is should not be, someone should not be shamed for that. I believe that if it's encouraged, they can move beyond taking the first step and even asking so that their children can.
Yeah, I think that's a really important piece of advice. Jeffrey, what do you think? I mean, obviously it's not an easy issue to broach, is it? When you're trying to get buy-in from your child, but I mean, a lot of parents, just may not be aware of the kinds of support systems that are out there.
Yeah, one of the first things I want to say, and I'm sure everyone's heard this before, it takes a village, and that means, parents, caregivers, educators, mentors, neighbors. We just need to work together to support each other. One of the main things is people don't like to go talk to somebody else about what issues they're going through. So when you keep that so independent or so suppressed to just your family, it's of course going to be really difficult to know who did your friend go to seek somebody for help, or how did she get this person help. So once we start really embracing the fact that it's and normalizing, mental health care, it shouldn't be any different from going to a primary care physician or being referred to a good dentist. This will really be a really great way to get the process of seeking help moving. But for now, what we have is places like NAMI and 211 and the Mental Health Association. These are great referral sources where you can contact them anonymously, and they will be able to provide whatever you're looking for, however you want to say it. What if it's financial hardships, if it's job loss, homelessness, whatever you're going through. These are all mental health needs that can be addressed through organizations like this. it's really important for these caregivers and parents to, in a sense, humble themselves. You don't have the answers. You can't fix your child. Your child is not going to feel better just because you just let them stay in the room or you take them out to eat or something like that. These issues tend to get worse as they age, and if you don't really address it now at the moment, especially during a time when we're in a pandemic and the outlets that we have are not necessarily there like it used to be, you're gonna see a lot of difficulty with this person or these youth getting treatment and getting better from these treatment as they get older.
Jeffrey had some great recommendations there, and we have actually put together a toolkit to provide our community with local and national resources that they can download from the Wellbeings website. The website that you can go to for that is wellbeings.org/WUCF. On the site, you'll also see a link to our feedback survey, and please do take a moment to tell us what you thought about tonight's event while you're there. That's wellbeings.org/WUCF. Now, when it comes to how we as a community can help, Danielle Gillison, the CEO of NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, as we've mentioned, spoke with PBS NewsHour student reporter Brittany Blake about NAMI's new program, Vote for Mental Health, and how we can all get involved.
Hello, my name is Brittany Blake, a senior at Howard W. Blake High School.
Hi, Brittany. My name is Dan Gillison, and I'm the CEO for the National Alliance on Mental Illness.
Hello, my name is Brittany Blake, a senior at Howard W. Blake High School.
Hi, Brittany. My name is Dan Gillison, and I'm the CEO for the National Alliance on Mental Illness.
Thank you for being here today. Why did the National Alliance of Mental Illness decide to get involved with the Wellbeings Initiative?
Brittany, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you and the audience on today. And there's really 5 reasons why we got involved with Wellbeings. And first of all, the National Alliance on Mental Illness is the largest grassroots mental illness organization in the country, with 48 state chapters and over 600 affiliates across the country doing work in communities where we have individuals with living with mental illness and or their families who we are supporting with our advocacy and our education. The next is that we're a proud sponsor of Wellbeings, and Wellbeings was launched at the NAMICon 2020 virtual convention this summer. And we're partnering across communities and across the country with Wellbeings to really look to make an impact. The next part of your question is why is the Wellbeings national campaign actually matches up to our strategic goals. And that is people getting help early, people getting the best possible care, and people getting diverted from justice system involvement. And when you start talking about people getting help early, we look at the youth mental health crisis as an area of opportunity and need.
So as far as the Vote for Mental Health campaign, it's known that elected officials have a great impact inside of mental health policies. So can you explain how local, state, and national leaders affect mental health policies?
Yes, local, state, and national officials impact policy and legislation from the grassroots, like the National Alliance on Mental Illness, where the rubber hits the road in the local community, all the way up to the state legislative body, and then to the national body from a policy standpoint. So the impact from the local to the state to the national, or what we call the federal, is very important. And laws are written, and policy is driven from all 3 of those communities to actually impact mental health as it is delivered in the local community and as it's legislated nationally.
How can people get involved with Vote for Mental Health?
Brittany, thank you for that question. And it's really 3 things that people can do and our young people can do. And I think the first one is to take the pledge to vote for mental health. at voteformentalhealth.org. And then when you do that, we'll share not only voting information for your state, but ways to engage after the election. The next one is second, share the message with others. Part of this effort is to empower everyone to share the message with friends and family. And when you go to the website, you'll find graphics you can use on social media to share your story. And the biggest thing is we have signs you can fill in about why you vote for mental health. So join us to spread the message. And last but not least, learn where the candidates you're deciding between stand on the issues that you care about. So this is where you want to get your learning and gather your information, know what their positions are, and then ask them about those issues. Make sure their plans help inform your vote and that of others that are in your community and your peers.
So you mentioned before that mental health is intertwined with policy issues. What do you mean by that statement?
Well, if you're thinking, Brittany, if you think about mental health care, 1 in 5 people in the U.S. experience a mental health condition, but more than half don't receive any treatment. If you really think about it, if your vote could be driven based off of the racial injustices, your vote could be driven off of the economy. And it still fits into looking at the unemployment rates that are highest among adults who are living with a mental illness. And then if you look at the communities of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, they face additional barriers that are impacted in this process. And this is the area of need in terms of change, in terms of voice, in terms of care. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And this is the place that we can demonstrate that. And we really challenge our young people, no matter what your political affiliation is, vote and care.
Social distancing is new to all of us. Schools are closed, businesses are struggling, and the feelings of isolation can be overwhelming. For some people, this is a new feeling. For others, feelings of isolation are a struggle they live with every day. It may be difficult right now, but you are not alone. 1 in 5 people experience mental illness, but as a result of this crisis, we're all impacted. In the best of times, it's hard to find mental health treatment, and this crisis is making it even more difficult. Now more than ever, we need to stand up together to fight for better support for everyone. Your vote has the power to help. The policymakers we elect make the decisions that affect how, when, and where we can get the mental health services we need. Take the first step. Pledge to vote for mental health.
Well, as you might expect, we've got plenty of audience questions for our panel this evening, and we're going to start with one of the big issues that a number of them have alluded to during the course of this evening's discussion, and that is the impact of social media. Does it help or does it hurt on the issue of mental health, and how do we manage that? And I'm going to turn the first question to Candace on that one. Boy, I mean, social media, it is a really important factor, isn't it, when it comes to talking about youth?
It really is. And this is a topic that I discuss with families every day that I'm in the clinic. 45% of adolescents report that they are online almost constantly. And boy, do I see that. Most of their popular platforms, of course, are Snapchat and Instagram and YouTube. There are benefits to technology, to social media, especially in times of COVID. So there's social connection. Kids feel like they can still connect with family and friends. There is support and even learning that comes through social media, right? We learn a lot through looking at Facebook and different platforms. However, on the other hand, almost 25% of adolescents believe that social media has a mostly negative effect. So they are seeing the downside of it. Some researchers have suggested that this increase in mental illness that we're all talking about, even in Black youth, is at least in part due to a rise in social media use among adolescents and young adults. So time spent on social media correlates with depression and anxiety, disruption of sleep, which we know has an effect or impact on your mental health, fear of missing out, body image concerns, and even cyberbullying. So some actionable steps I always talk about with parents are supervising social media use of parental controls, co-watching and finding those teachable moments to teach their kids that's not cool, that's not right, that's not accurate, that's not safe. And having a family media use plan to set those limits and manage that screen time. And you can go to Common Sense Media or the American Academy of Pediatrics, healthychildren.org to set up a family media use plan for your kids.
Davey, I wanted to ask you about social media. It's interesting what Dr. Jones had to say there about how youth themselves view social media, that many of them, a majority of them, seem to be aware that this is damaging to mental health often, or that it has negative consequences at least. How much of a factor is social media these days on the mental health of youth?
It is definitely a factor. Dr. Jones mentioned FOMO. That is something that the youth don't want to do. There's many challenges that they can be a part of. I've been encouraging parents to screen, learning your child, knowing what they're viewing on social media, because it can be detrimental to their mental health. Imagine signing on and seeing something that you can't unsee. That is definitely a problem, and it can affect them because it can allow them to spiral to being anxious or feeling depressed or feeling like they don't want to leave their home. We've had some issues where parents are asking, well, how do I control that? Using the tools that Dr. Jones has mentioned can help, as well as having those dinner table conversations is what I can think of. Talking about like what's going on and what are you seeing? Let's limit it. I see that it's affecting your sleep. You haven't been getting much sleep lately. What's going on? Parents may find out that their child may be being bullied and they're just unaware just by even having access to their social media accounts.
I got a question here that's come in from Tracy. She asks, what strengths do we have in the African American community with respect to mental health, and how can these be maximized to support youth? Let me send that one to you, Tamia. That's an interesting question. Are there strengths in particular in the African American community that could be a positive?
Oh my goodness, yes. Like, as a community, resiliency is, we exude resilience. We are here. The fact that we are here, we've already won, we survived. Generations upon generations, we have survived, so we're here. So looking at the fact of being resilient and being expressive and being creative, just our very existence, our very essence, and so when we're looking at what to do, be you. We know how to be. We're communal minded. As a community, we band together. We're talking about peer support as spaces, but that's something that we've been doing in the Black community for years, reaching in, checking on, bringing in, taking in, pulling in. That's what we do. That's who we are as a people. But it's definitely time for those efforts to be supported and those efforts to be acknowledged as something that we do innately and that we can and we will continue to do. There's a South African proverb, Ubuntu. A person is a person through other people. I am we. We are the community. So we'll continue to wrap our arms around this community that we love. So definitely, as a community, resiliency, it exudes from our very veins. However, it's our responsibility to dismantle these structures that we have to continue to be resilient from.
Yeah, Jeffrey, what do you think about that resiliency? That seems like an important point, right? And to the later point that Tamia made there, working to try to to change the institutions and the structural issues that the African American community is having to be resilient from, as she says.
Yes, Tamia hit it on the head. Resiliency is the epitome of being Black in America. We've been through so much generational trauma, and so for our Black youth, they're unfortunately the successors of a lot of this trauma. But like she said, we're here now. We're thriving. We're making do with the little that we have, and showing so much power in what we can do with these different products that we can bring in, and a lot of people in the Black community still have issues with their own identity because there's so much racism and inequality and disparities coming from our systems, our systematic structures. So it's very important for us to tap into these strengths. We have a really good sense of being a collective culture and pushing through together. We have a really large families. I know my family is really large, and we love to bring people in and help. I wouldn't be surprised if half of the people who are in my family aren't necessarily related to me, but just because we're Black and we understand the experience of being Black in America, that's such a strength. Just having us together and being able to build on what we have at the time being. But for sure, breaking down some of these structures, a lot of these structures are systematically just not equipped to provide for us. They don't have the necessary need. They don't have the right competence to give us exactly what we need. And then, like we said earlier, there's still a lot of mistrust. So even for us as African Americans to go and tap into these things that are looking to help and looking to really be empathetic and genuine with helping us, we still are like, no, we don't want it because we don't know your intentions with that. So we have to, as a culture, really come together and really find what is good for us and what is not good for us. But there's been so much divisiveness within the world today that it is really hard to navigate. But I think overall, our resiliency of being such a collective culture will be the best part of how we get through it.
Candice, I see you agreeing strongly with Tamia and Jeffrey there.
I love all of that. I love it. I would just add, not much, just that I love the way we pray and our faith. That's just more to add to that resilience pot. We know that has healing powers and can keep us strong and buffer us from all of the trauma that we endure. In addition, I want to just leave an actionable step of, as a Black community, raising up young Black youth who are engaged in the community, who vote, and who know how to advocate for themselves and the community as a whole. Not be intimidated. Reach out, as the CEO said in the video, reach out at every level, locally, state, federal, and make these legislators put us and our issues on their agendas. If we have disparity or differences that shouldn't be in our health and wealth and education and so forth and so on, then why aren't you addressing this? Otherwise, it's just neglect. And so I demand that you address this, because it's not a genetic reason or a biological reason for it or a personal failing reasons. There are systems that are failing us, and you need to put that on your agenda and address these problems within our community. These differences don't have to be. And so we have to raise up a generation that do that and teach our kids how to advocate for themselves.
Davey, I want to close with you and get your final thoughts on that. Candace saying that, it's just basically we have to deal with these issues, that people in positions of power and responsibility, it's incumbent upon them to deal with it. And maybe this is a generational issue, and this is a time when we can be sort of educating the future generation about these structural problems and what can be done about it. I mean, presumably that's something you would agree with.
That is definitely something that I agree with. Just piggybacking on what Dr. Jones said, we do need to get out and vote because our issues need to be heard and they need to be understood. So anyone that's unsettling, please do, because our young people are up and coming. So if we do have systemic racism, why not stand up and be the change while we can, while we're still here, so that we can leave a legacy of I made it, so can you. So with another actionable step is to continue to practice self-care by journaling or tapping into your power. You never know, you can do creativity like expressive arts or dance, but we all are in this together. You are not alone, and we stand united as we continue to be well-beings.
Well, you know, this is such a complex issue, and I feel that we could go on talking about it all night, but I'm afraid, you know, that's all the time we have. I'm looking at the clock and it's against us. So on behalf of WUCF and the PBS Wellbeings Tour created by WETA, I'd like to thank our panel for joining us this evening. I truly appreciate your insight into this, you know, really critical yet overlooked issue in many places. And thank you so much to our audience as well, just by tuning in, that you've showed that, you know, that you care. And I hope, you know, we help give you a clearer understanding into the particular mental health challenges facing Black youth and the sort of tangible steps to provide support. Please remember, you can visit the Wellbeings website. It's wellbeings.org/WUCF. To download the free Central Florida Mental Health Toolkit that provides local and national support resources. Our discussion tonight is being recorded and will be on the website soon as well. I'm going to let Deja, the star of the show, I would say, close our discussion. This remarkable young lady has some powerful words of encouragement for others who've experienced similar pain to her. Then we'll show you a preview of the upcoming Ken Burns documentary, Hiding in Plain Sight, which will air in April 2022, followed by information on how you can get involved with the Wellbeings Tour. Thank you so much for joining us. Stay well, and let's all commit to being allies for our youth. You know, they are our hope for the future. Have a good night.
If I had to help someone out and give them some advice, I would say, don't lose yourself, because losing yourself in that situation only makes things worse. It's like you're giving in to those words, and one thing you have to do is stay strong. And I know it's very difficult, but when you learn to loving yourself is the strongest weapon to help you in those types of situations. I did not love myself, and I realized that maybe if I cared more a little about myself, I wouldn't focus on their words so much, because you know who you are, you know what you love, you know what you do, and you know where you come from. So stay with yourself, remember who you are, and don't let anyone change your character. That's the most important thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The only thing I know how to do is to share my own story and my own experience. I can't tell anyone what they can't see for themselves, but I can tell them what it was like for me, what happened to me, and what it's like now that I have recognized my own illness.
It was something in the back of my head, really. It was something that I didn't really worry about.
My dad was an alcoholic, and just like the anxiety of him coming home at night.
It's a strange thing to look back on and think to myself, I really didn't care about anything at that point.
I remember a lot of nights where I would sit in my bed and cry, like for hours after hours.
I felt a lot of pain inside, and I couldn't explain that. I couldn't relay that to other people outside.
The feeling is like walking through, it's like being pulled down, being pulled into like quicksand.
It affects my daily life all day, every day.
To go to school, you know, you put on a face, a facade, you're happy, you're bubbly, and then you eat lunch alone in the bathroom.
I started to self-harm. I learned it in a book that I read.
I'm tired of the voices. I'm tired of everybody labeling me and saying that I'm crazy.
What happens to people with a serious mental illness is that, just like a serious cancer, it begins to metastasize. It turns into disability.
I remember waking up and being in the psych ward and being like, what am I doing here? I had a very high opinion of myself.
It gets complicated by substance abuse.
Drugs and alcohol worked very well for me because they took that anxiety that I had and that sense of isolation, and they eliminated those things.
Drugs and drinking, and that was kind of my excuse, like that outside excuse to match up that feeling of powerlessness inside.
When I finally did start to think oh, I'm probably an addict, I was like, no, you're just lying to yourself, you know?
When the suicide rate goes up, nobody even knows about it.
I still had a whole future that I had planned, it's like I was planning the suicide, but at the same time, I was making plans to go out to the movies with my friends the next week.
My life was gonna end one way, and that was being addicted to drugs, so why not start now?
I wasn't meant to be on this earth.
Long sleeves, no one knew what was on my wrist.
It was actually on social media. These boys were harassing me about something I did. I couldn't deal with it anymore. Yeah, I actually went through with it. I actually tried to hurt myself.
Those are the moments where I have the best opportunity to plant a seed in someone else's mind. The fact of the matter is, if you don't show some vulnerability, if you don't speak honestly, then there's no truth. And if there's no truth, there's no connection.
It's taken me a very, very long time to even speak openly about it. I think there's a lot of pressure in being vulnerable, especially now with social media and everyone judging you. My roommates don't even know half of this stuff that I'm telling you guys now. And I'm nervous, I'm kind of shaking inside to even talk about it. But if I can even reach 2 people from everything I say or this story, then I did my part in this world.
We don't understand how common it is. We don't understand how important it is to talk about it and be open about it. So this is the problem that we all deal with in secret. And the result is that we don't deal with it well.
The We Are Wellbeings Story Wall is a central part of the wellbeings.org website, social media platform, and the Wellbeings National Tour. We are asking the public of all ages to submit personal reflections, videos, photos, and short stories to offer hope, to foster understanding, to build community, and break down stigma.
What does being well mean to you? What is the one thing you wish people knew about mental health? What is your passion? What's your story?
Video can easily be submitted via social media using the hashtag #wellbeings or emailed to info@wellbeings.org.
Stories can also be submitted by uploading to Dropbox and live at Wellbeings Tour events. The We Are Wellbeings Story Wall is made possible through generous support provided by Wellbeings Youth Mental Health Project founding corporate sponsor Otska and Wellbeings media partner People.